Good morning and welcome to the second edition of the Employment Roundtable. My name's Greg Ellers. I'm the CEO of REQ Consulting, and my co-hosts today are Jude Bateman, a long tenured employment specialist working with companies from 10 to 10,000 people. Jude's experience is something that we cherish every day every week when we meet. And Alex comes to us from Boston. She has spent many years in writing and employment, different aspects from hiring to consulting. And I welcome both of you to the show today.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Thanks for having us.
You're welcome. So today we're talking about part-time employment. On Friday, we had the U.S. labor statistics come out and show over 300,000 jobs created, and absent the 71,000 created by the federal government, all the rest were part-time jobs. The job seekers were trying to fill a second position due to the economic situations all of us are facing today. Stubborn higher inflation levels, making a higher level of cost of living, be it groceries, rent, gas, insurance, etc. And this is a dynamic that is probably going to stay with us for some period of time. I want to turn it over to Jude because I know she's been spending a lot of time and working with people that are looking for that second job. So Jude, with that, I'm going to let you take over, maybe explain a little bit on the resume aspect where we're going to start today as the employee. I know there's different challenges that somebody has to look at because they don't traditionally want to find that second job that they get turned down from because they're told they're overqualified. So with that, I'll let you, I'll start. And welcome to the show today.
Thank you. All right. So from the employer perspective or from the employee?
Why don't you start with the employee perspective, Jude?
Okay. Yeah, we're getting a lot of feedback, and most of it is met with a tremendous amount of concern. So I first want to address that issue, that emotional aspect of it, which is just the uncertainty in general. So just as a reminder, this is all temporary, right? Everything is temporary. We understand that there's a lot of change that's coming our way, and although we may not know exactly what's going to occur, we do have an idea in sight that it would change in terms of being a little bit more positive in terms of outcome. So for everybody out there struggling with 2 or 3 jobs, stick with it. We're in this together. We're going to help you through it, and just know that it can't be forever, right? So with that, I want to talk about the different types of resumes that are necessary in order to support you if you're out there trying to get that second job, maybe a side gig of some sort that you'd need a resume for. So first thing is understanding that there are 3 types of resumes, and Alex will probably go a little more in depth in this because she definitely has more skill in this specific aspect. But understanding that if you're doing a side part-time job, you may not need to go as in depth. You may not need as much of a skill-based functional resume, and make sure you have someone who is a professional spot check it to ensure that if they're looking at it through the lens of that employer, is it attractive enough that it won't automatically be discarded? And you might also want to think in terms of, we understand that resumes are a time for us to shine and really showcase our skills, but we might want to limit how many skills we're adding so that we're not automatically being disqualified. I'll give you an example of that. If I have one resume that's specific to my profession in HR consulting, but I need a side gig at a casino in the evening serving cocktails, then naturally I'm going to completely limit that resume and make it very different, just only showcasing, very, very limited, showcasing just those skills that are specific to that position. So really making those two very, very distinct in the eyes of the hiring manager.
No, that makes sense. One thing, do you feel that going for that second job it's even more important because you're trying to, or the data is demonstrating and the experience you're seeing, spend more time trying to reach out to that employer to explain to them why this job is so important to you, because
Mm.
don't you run the risk when you take a part-time job of being disqualified just because they already see you have a job, because in some way or another it's going to be disclosed, right?
Ooh, interesting question.
Mhm.
Some of the feedback that I get, believe it or not, most people are not disclosing it because they don't want to be disqualified. So they're not necessarily lying to the employer, but they're not sharing that they have that position. Whether they're asked and how they answer is a different subject, but most of the time they're not even sharing it. They're going into the job as if this is their only job because they know that that's the way to get it. So, I mean, we can
What do
talk
you
about.
think? What do you think of that, Alex, when you're screening people? How do you get around that? Because you're going to ask the question, you screen dozens of people a week or
Mhm.
more, and when you ask that question, you have a duty to disclose. What's your where do you go with this?
It's kind of a multi-layered question, to be perfectly honest. I think it depends a lot on the employer, it depends on the job. Um, you know, I think from, if I may switch gears for a brief moment, from the employer side, I think we all need to recognize that times are challenging right now. The cost of living, as you said, Greg, is much higher. And as employers, I think we need to be a little bit more understanding that people have bills to pay, we have children to take care of, you have responsibilities. And this just might be a necessary time where people do have to have a second job. And I think we need to be very forgiving with that. From an employee perspective, I'm a fan of transparency to a degree. Well, I'm a fan of transparency, but I do understand your point, Jude, in that, understanding why a lot of people won't disclose that they are full-time employees as well. Because for some, it can seem like a conflict of interest, or people are wondering, how do you have the time to balance it all? And at the end of the day, is we all need to do what we need to do to take care of ourselves, right? So, um, I think when you're applying for a job, again, it's completely up to you as to whether or not you're going to disclose it. But if you are going to disclose it, I think you need to be prepared to talk about the whys and how you present it. I think a lot is going to come back to how you present it. You don't necessarily want to say on an interview, I'm really struggling financially and I need this job. You want to make sure that you are presenting it in a way that shows that you are still a qualified person, that you're still, financially savvy in your personal life. However, times are tough. I think everybody is probably going to understand that. Because this is nothing new. We've all been dealing with this higher cost of living for some time now. So it's not like this is a new concept coming into the job market, right? But how you word it and how you phrase it, I think you need to be delicate about. You want to make sure that both your full-time and your part-time employers know that you are dedicated to the job. And so just finding the right way to communicate that appropriately, I think is crucial.
And so from the employer standpoint, though, because you work with employers, both of you do on a regular basis, but
Mhm.
they tell you, I need to find a person for this job. Do you have that candid conversation right away with them, saying your your best candidates might be part-time candidates? I mean, how do you work with the employer on that side? Because the last thing the employer wants is a turnover, right? But yet
Correct.
at the same time, there's there's a fine line there, because I might need that second job for 3 years. So do you disclose that to the employer saying, look, I've got this great person named Greg. He needs this job. His kids are getting ready to go to college. He needs this job for probably 3 years if you're going to be able to have it. So you're trying to manage the expectations of the
Mhm.
employer. I mean, because you have to, there's a balance there. And we all know, or I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Jude or Alex, the quality of full-time candidates is very, very challenging right now because they're more sedentary, and being able to move where jobs are less likely. So you need to find people that can potentially fill some of these part-time jobs for you? I mean, is that a way you're working with the employers, Alex?
Yes, I think from my personal experiences to your initial point that you made, bringing this up in the conversation early on, I think is absolutely crucial. Whether you're hiring somebody for full-time or part-time, I guess if you're looking to hire for somebody full-time, then you need to evaluate, are your salary expectations or what you're offering salary wise, what is it compared to the cost of living in that market? Is it something that's reasonable? If it's not something that's really comparable to somebody being able to support themselves, then you need to be, as I said earlier, forgiving about understanding that that person probably will need a second job. Especially if it's a single parent, which is very common. So I think from the employer perspective, if you can't afford to pay somebody a certain amount of money that allows them to support themselves and their families off of the salary you're offering, then you also need to be understanding about the fact that they will probably need something to supplement themselves. Absolutely. If you're hiring for somebody on a part-time basis, I think similar conversation. Just because somebody is coming for a part-time job doesn't mean that they're going to be there for 2 weeks and they're going to leave. A lot of people look at part-time jobs as their fun jobs. There's a lot of people, myself included, who keep a second part-time job because not only does it help you financially, but also for those of us who work from home, for example, it helps you maintain your social skills. It helps you remember how to get out of the house and be physically active, and be in a work environment where you're around people. I think there's quite a few layers into this conversation, but I do believe it is something that should be discussed early on, from the employer perspective, especially. Absolutely.
Jude, do you, as a consultant to a lot of businesses, and I don't know how many you talk to on a regular basis, I know it's in the hundreds a month, but when you talk to people about putting up a job or they need to fill a role, how much of the conversation is around, and what kind of feedback do you get when somebody says, well, I want to hire somebody for $30,000, and you're like, you're not going to get anybody for 30,000 if you realize that the environment's changed. I mean, how do those conversations go? Because sometimes they're hard conversations, but are you finding that your clients are more open to it, or do they become reluctant and then you go into well, maybe you could hire 2 part-time people? Where does that work?
There's always a strategy to address, but I discuss the limitations right from the beginning. So for example, if they're going to come to me and say, I need a person for this job that's only 30,000, and it really doesn't seem to logically match up to the job description, then we address it head on and we immediately make some adjustments. So it's very collaborative and very open. And most of the time, based on the tenure and experience of my clients, they're already fully aware of the limitations and the challenges. So they're ready to pivot quickly, or they're addressing it before I even have to make any mention of it. But they're also well aware that with part-time jobs, and we can look at the data to confirm this as well, is that part-time versus full-time, you're going to see churn. That churn cycle is a lot higher, right? So they already know that they're going to meet that challenge where they're going to have that attrition rate is going to be a lot different than if it's full-time. So they know that that's the case. And they also know that we're met with a lot of uncertainty with the times. So whether they're not quite sure what's going to happen or they're anticipating a specific change, I think they're pretty aware of it for the most part, at least from my experience.
No, that makes sense. So as we we've started today talking about the employment situation of finding that second job, and clearly the data is demonstrating, and the day-to-day instances that you're having with employers and potential employees looking for that second job, it's a trend that's not going away. And we kind of talked around some of the challenges of the resume targeting, so you don't look overqualified. If If you're going to go work in a casino, it doesn't matter that you can code. You're going out to whether you're going to be a blackjack dealer or a cocktail waitress, whatever the case might be, those have different skill sets that you need. So you've got to meet the new job there.
Yeah.
And we talked about the element of working with the employer to be able to have address the fact that, as Alex, you said, just because you're taking on a part-time job, it might not be for 2 weeks, it might be for 2 years, and being able to communicate that well. If there's a message that you want to leave people with today, Jude, both as the employer who's seeing the challenges of bad candidates or candidates that they don't seem to fit the job, what's your message to them? And the same for the employees that are out looking for that second job, as you kind of went through the resume situation. What other message would you like to leave them with today? And then Alex, I'm going to have you say the same things. Jude?
Yeah, absolutely. My strongest message for the job seeker is going to be focusing on the way that you're presenting yourself in that second job. It's perfectly fine to be transparent and letting them know you do have a full-time job, because eventually that's going to be, it's going to show up somewhere, right? Whether you have challenges and conflicts with being able to get to and from, whatever the case is, then letting them know, but it's really in the way that you're presenting it, why you want that second job and why they should hire you for it. So really focusing on how they can depend on you regardless of your challenges. So be prepared for that. That's
great.
that's my biggest message there.
Got it. Alex?
It's so funny that you said that, Jude, because I literally wrote down why in capital letters. Would say a similar message. And when you're interviewing for this second job, granted, I understand a lot of us need it financially, okay? In this economy and with everything that's going on, yes, we need it financially. However, when you're interviewing with an employer, you don't want to say that the reason I want this second job is because I need money. You know, that's not how you want to communicate that. You still need to keep in mind, even if it's a second part-time job, you still need to contribute something. You're contributing to the growth of the company. You're contributing to its success. And so you want to make sure that you are addressing that during the interview. So if they're asking you, why are you interested in doing this, you know, as a part-time job? You know, it can be fairly simple and still transparent. There can still be truth to it without necessarily saying, just addressing the financial piece of it. You know, it could say, hey, my job, for my full-time job, I tend to work in a really quiet office and I need something to have that helps me move around a little bit more. I need something where there's more social engagement. That's why I want to wait tables as a part-time job. You know, this is my fun job. This is something that people are what gets me out of bed in the morning. And I feel that I need more people-to-people interaction. So you want to make sure that you are focusing on what the job actually entails and why that is something that interests you. And it's okay to be transparent, or to keep an element of the truth to it without specifically just saying, I really need some money right now. That's not what people want to hear. That's not what's going to get you the job. I mean, we all understand that everyone needs money, okay?
No, that makes perfect sense. Well, listen, let's wrap it up there. I want to thank Jude Bateman. I want to thank Alex. I really appreciate the opportunity every Sunday morning or weekend morning. I think we're going to try Saturday next week, getting together to talk about this at the Roundtable, because for me, it's cathartic as well, right? We spend our week talking to people, whether we're trying to help them with wellness, health, employment, whatever the case might be. We have to always find ourselves getting to the person we're talking to on the phone. And in doing this each week, hopefully we're helping our listeners understand it's not about where you sit, it's about where you want to be. And I think that's what we're trying to bring to everybody. So with that, I thank you both. Have a great rest of your Sunday, and until next weekend, have a prosperous week.
Thank you, Greg.
Thank you.